Right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will wait just a couple of seconds here, allow people to come in from the waiting room. See you all entering the space. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We're really looking forward to having you here with us, our guest speaker. All right, so good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's program, 13 Moons, Seasons and Lifeways of the Mashantucket Pequot with Nakai Northup of the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center. My name is Stephanie Barnett, and I'm the Public Programs Manager here at the Greenwich Historical Society. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to our fourth and final lecture in our annual Shining a Light series, which is dedicated to elevating and amplifying underrepresented voices in local history in order to highlight the stories, research, and people who are dedicated to interpreting, restoring, and preserving these histories. Funding for this project is made possible by the state of Connecticut and the National Endowment for the Humanities, both of which provide significant support to Connecticut humanities. And we are so pleased to close out our series with this virtual talk with Nakai Northup, who's the Public Programs Manager at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center. Before we dive into tonight's program, I'll just go over a couple of housekeeping details. This is going to be a 75-minute long program, so we'll have a good amount of time at the end for a question and answer session. And I encourage you all to drop your questions in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions that come up while Nakai is speaking, feel free to drop them in there, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of his talk. We're also going to be recording this, so we'll make sure that we send this along with other resources out at the conclusion of the lecture. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the evening, Nakai Clearwater Northup. Nakai is a passionate advocate and activist for Native American rights, and he recently received the Connecticut Magazine's 40 Under 40 Award, which is very impressive. He's a member of both the Narragansett and Mashantucket Pequot tribes, and as a museum educator at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum, he has over 10 years of experience developing and teaching programs on Eastern woodland tribal history. He spent his entire life in his Native communities and is passionate about preserving tribal histories and traditions for future generations. He also serves as a vice chair for the Mashantucket Pequot Natural Resource Committee, and we are so thrilled to have him here with us tonight. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Nakai.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the opportunity. Cha, Natesawis, Nakai, Clearwater Northup from the Mashantucket Pequot Nation and the Narragansett Nation. Today, my program is going to be focusing on the 13 Moons program, but before I jump into the presentation, I also just want to give you guys a quick crash course on my people and our history and what we're presently doing today. So my Mashantucket Pequot community today, our population is roughly 1,200 people. We are in southeastern Connecticut, and we are one of 5 recognized tribes in Connecticut. One of 2 federally recognized tribes between the Mashantucket Pequots and the Mohegans, and then state recognized tribes are your Eastern Pequots, Golden Hill Pagussets, and Schaghticoke. So my community fought in the very first war against the English, and that's really what we're known for, other than having foxwoods. So my community played a really big role in the initial steps of colonialism and that process that we're going to talk about as we kind of move through. And the program that I'm going to go with, 13 Moons, which is a program I developed, it's one of my favorite programs, and we offer it at the museum now as well. But is a really traditional way of life, and it's something that we're able to do today and that we can get back to. And that's a really big thing, is taking the time, and we all have this opportunity to reevaluate things we have going on in our lives. And I have a bracelet that I always wear that says decolonize my mind, or decolonize your mind, which my aunt brought home, and it really resonated with me because there's so much that we can do in our life to take these necessary steps to decolonize. But I always joke around and tell people there's levels to decolonization, especially with it getting hot out now and summer starting to come around. I joke around and tell people everyone wants to decolonize until it's time to take out the air conditioners. But my community is a thriving community. We're alive and well. We're still here today. And some things that are really cool going on in our community today is we're revitalizing our language. Pequot people are able to speak their language again, which is huge because in 1638, there was a treaty signed called the Treaty of Hartford, which stated that Pequot people couldn't live on their land. They couldn't call themselves Pequots and they couldn't speak their language. The result of this document separated the Pequot people into two separate communities, which is still upholding today. And one of the longer, more hurtful factors is we lost our language, or it was hidden from us. And we're reclaiming our language now, and we're able to have classes for our adults. Our young ones are immersed in classes almost daily at our Child Development Center. And it's becoming a big thing in the community. If you drive on my reservation and you'll come to a stop sign, you'll see it will say Akwish, which means stop in Pequot. So taking things back slowly and slowly, reintroducing it to the community. And a model that we have and something we're working on at the museum as well is all of our job positions, our titles will be in the language, our classrooms. So really not sugarcoating anything. I have 3 children and my 2 sons, their name are both Algonquian names. And that's just a little step, but anytime someone says their name, which is Kanachet and then Kachamiquan, they'll be speaking Pequot, they'll be speaking Algonquin, which is a really beautiful thing and something we take a lot of pride in. Additionally, we have an agricultural department that is about 5-6 years old now, and it's coming back around, and it's really big in our community because we're able to feed our people now. There's a food stand that we have on reservation where they sell produce. We make our own maple syrup. We have cows and pigs and chickens and all that good stuff. But getting into food sovereignty, another thing that the community is working on is promoting traditional diets. And food sovereignty is something I'm extremely passionate about. I'm a hunter, fisherman, gatherer, and a cook. And food sovereignty plays a huge role in my life, and it's something I'm extremely passionate about. As we go through the 13 Moons talk, a vast majority of it is about gifts that the land offers, and those gifts are often food. So I'm going to jump into the 13 Moons program afterwards. I want to have a conversation with you guys. If you guys have questions, anything you'd like to ask, doesn't have to pertain specifically to this presentation, but any information you're curious about Pequot people, Eastern Woodland people, I'll be more than happy to share. Let's see. Can you guys see the presentation now? No? Let's see. Good. All right. So 13 Moons is something really, really important for our people, and it comes from our creation story. We have a belief, just like everyone else, of how our people were created. And our belief has to do with the story of Sky Woman. We believe up above us is a sky world, and in this sky world, there was a storm. And as this storm completed, Sky Woman wandered from her home to look and evaluate the damage that was caused from the storm. And she saw a big tree had fallen in Sky World. And she was curious, and she was pregnant at the time. So she was wandering off and she was looking, she was curious, and she went up to this tree that had fallen and saw a hole in Sky World. And she was peeking down through that hole and she saw Earth. But at this time, Earth had no land on it whatsoever. It was just a big planet of water. And she was peeking down through and she slipped through that hole and she started to fall down towards Earth. And as she was falling, all the waterfowl, the ducks, the geese started to slowly guide her fall and lead her down to Earth. As she got closer to the water, a giant turtle, a great turtle, rose from the sea. And they placed her on the back of that turtle and she called out for help. And she had a task to be completed. And she said if anyone could complete this task, that she could bring more life to Earth. So whales, sharks, fish, beavers, otters, muskrats, all different animals swam up to the turtle. And the whale said, you know what, I can complete this task. This is really easy for me, being the biggest animal in the sea. And with one flip of his tail, got to the bottom of the ocean. But as he got to the bottom of the ocean, his fins didn't work out too good at the bottom. So he struggled with that and he swam back up and he was disappointed. And little muskrat was sitting on the back of the turtle. And muskrat said, I can do it. This is really not too hard. And everyone laughed at him and said, you're little, you smell funny. We don't think you could do it. And he took a deep breath and he did his best swan dive off the back of the turtle and swam down to the bottom. And with its little paw was able to grab earth, but swimming at such a depth, the pressure of the ocean actually crushed him and he didn't make it, but he completed the task. As he floated back up to the surface in his little paw, he had earth. And she took that earth from his paw and planted seeds on Turtle's back, and land spread. So we called North America Turtle Island because of this. Also, muskrats, future generations were gifted a beautiful soft pelt, very comparable to beaver today. So even though they smell bad, they have a really soft set of fur. And from that, the turtle shell became our traditional calendar. There's 13 full moons in each and every year. And each full moon for us represents something is ripe and ready to eat, or it's time for us to do something. Additionally, the outer edge of the shell of a turtle has 28 spaces on it. There's 28 spaces or 28 days in a lunar calendar between each full moon. And those 13 spaces represent the 13 full moons in each year. So it lines up perfectly. And this is snapping turtles. This is every turtle in the world. A sea turtle in the Caribbean, a tortoise in the Galapagos is going to have 13 spaces on the top of its shell and 28 around the rib. So that is a pretty amazing thing. This touches a little bit more on that. So a traditional way of life for our people relies on seasonality. And these are the seasons' names in our language. So right now we're in Sequan or spring. That's our new year. New life for our people represents new year. Then Nippon or summer. Summer is a time, my people were coastal people. We like to be down by the water a vast majority of the year. And in spring, we'll start to make our way down to the water. Typically around this time of year when the herring start to run up the streams, we say that the herring bring warm weather for our people. And then fall, you'll do most of your harvesting spring, summer, fall, and that will get you through winter. Winter was hard for everything. And as we go through this program, we'll learn a little bit more about that. But we kick off with March. March is our Wakapahik, our maple sugar moon. Wakapahik in Pequot translates to sweet soup because of the process of boiling down the sugar water to make sap, to make the syrup. So this is a picture of our sugar shack. We have been making maple syrup for over 40 years on reservation. It's something that's really, really important to us as a people. The darker building that you see there is one that was added more recently, and that's our bottling and processing for the reservation. We have this available to the public. We have different events throughout the year. But most importantly in March, where we have big breakfasts and giveaways here at the Sugar Shack. If you go eat a short stack of pancakes at Foxwoods, you will have syrup tapped right in Mashantucket, which is pretty cool. But this is representing the new year. The ideal time to tap maple sugar is in March because it's warmer during the day and it hits freezing temperatures at night, and that causes the sap to flow to allow you to tap. It takes upwards of about 60 gallons of sugar water to make a gallon of syrup. April is our fish moon or our fishing moon. This is one of my favorites. The little fish on the left-hand side here is a herring. And these herring migrate up our streams, and that's the fish that we say bring the warm weather for our people. But they also provide a lot for us in forms of food. So we'll cook these herring. The most popular way to eat them in this region is to smoke them. But they're also filled with roe. So some of these herring are destined for the dinner plate. We'll eat some of the roe, but some of them are also destined for the garden to fertilize the soil. And they're coming at a good time of year after you're coming out of winter, and it's shorter days, you're getting less vitamin D, and you really need a boost of nutrients. These fish start to swim up our waters, and you literally stand in the water and scoop them with nets. And we fill up like 5-gallon buckets with them. These fish, card-holding federally recognized communities have the exclusive rights to harvest these fish in Massachusetts. So we typically go to Cape Cod to harvest these little fish. And some of those fish will also be destined to be bait for that striped bass that you see on the other side there, which they're starting to come. Some of them hold over in our waters, but bigger fish typically migrate away and they're coming back typically around now. Striper fishing is starting to pick up in this region, and it's really like the sporting fish of this area. May, our corn planting moon. So corn, we watch them is what we call it in our language. And corn is a really important crop for Indigenous people. It's a crop that originated as a wild grass and over thousands of years of Indigenous women domesticating this crop. We have the corn of today, which is in almost everything. But to us, the corn that we're growing is flint corn, 7-row corn, white cap corn. It doesn't have as much moisture, so it's meant for preserving. We dry it out and then we'll grind it up to make cornmeals, or we'll rehydrate it in soups or succotash. But such an important plant for our people. And once we were able to start getting into horticulture and growing crops such as corn, we figured out another method to grow this crop, and that's a method of companion planting, where we would plant corn with beans and squash. And after that, they were identified as the three sisters because they have such an amazing relationship. The interdependence of these plants is something that really symbolizes, and it's something that we recognize as a traditional way of life. You can't do things independently. You thrive. Our communities, like we were talking about, they thrive with relationships. And the relationships of corn, beans, and squash help them thrive and grow. Corn grows on a stalk. It grows nice and tall. Beans grow on a vine. They're going to wrap around that corn stalk because they need that support. Squash has a big leaf. It blocks the sun out. It keeps the soil moist longer, so you don't have to go in there and weed your garden all day long. Corn needs a very nitrogen and rich soil. Beans put nitrogen into the soil as they grow, and beans actually create nitrogen in a very oxygen-rich environment, which is very rare. You don't see really anywhere else in nature. From that, corn puts phosphorus into the soil, which helps the beans and the squash grow healthy. And when eaten together, they provide a lot of your nutrients you need to get through the day. So great crops. Once horticulture came around, Pequot populations really started to bloom. In the height of Pequot population, we hit about 12 to 16,000 Pequots between 26 known villages throughout Connecticut, into Rhode Island, and Long Island, New York. June, our strawberry moon, and we call strawberries wahams, watahams, and this is our first berry of the year. It's a good treat, and this is something I like to talk to people about today because we have a special event at the museum that's coming up in June. We have it annually, and it's a strawberry Thanksgiving. And these 13 moons are sometimes called 13 Thanksgivings. And that's because today we're extremely spoiled. When we want strawberries, we can go at any time of the year and drive to our local grocery store and get strawberries at any time. But traditionally, when you had to wait a year for those strawberries to come back around and be ripe and ready to eat, you would celebrate that. That's a gift. And some of our protocols with strawberries are the first ones from the garden that you pick, you have to share with someone. And this berry is also, it represents forgiveness. The story is that Creator created this berry for a couple to forgive each other. And so we have ceremonies and events that go along with this berry in our community to help us settle discrepancies and beefs in our communities. So it's a really, really awesome fruit. July, our blueberry moon. Blueberries are really important in our community. We have a bunch of blueberries that grow on the reservation, from huckleberries to high bush to low bush. And we will go pick these blueberries, and they're filled with antioxidants. They're great for you in that manner. But July is also one of the hottest times of the year. And these blueberries actually will help thin your blood to keep you cooler. So this is another example of food sovereignty. When you're eating traditional foods and foods from the region that you live, the foods will help you acclimate to the land and to the climate that you're living in. So when we need it the most, when we need to cool ourselves down, when we need to adjust, blueberries start to come around and we're able to harvest them. This is also really important. And a lot of the things that we're learning, these medicines, that's another huge thing. Today we think of medicine as, our Advils, our ibuprofens and things like that. But food is medicine traditionally. And this is when you go to the doctor, you're already you have a condition, you have an illness, you're going to get care afterwards. And that's medicine is supposed to be with you always. So when you're eating healthily, when you're eating these berries, when you're eating a traditional diet, it's helping keep your gut in line. Most disease starts in the gut anyways. So this traditional way of eating really benefited our people. And later on in history, when the expansion west was really prime and rolling, railroad systems were going in, and you started to see a way to combat indigenous people was by taking away food. The biggest example that we have here in America is the massacre of our bison, which the Plains people relied on heavily for pretty much like 80% of the stuff they have going on in their life, from tools, clothing, covering of their teepees, food. It's a huge resource. And when those bison were gone, they said, okay, we'll give you a box with bread, flour, cheese. And because of that, indigenous people are leaders in high blood pressure. We're leaders in diabetes, because these are things that our bodies aren't meant to process. It's things that slow us down and gunk us up. And when we eat more of a traditional diet, we avoid a lot of those things. My kids, I have 3 kids. My 2 oldest, we go pick blueberries when they're ripe on the res, and I'll fill my basket and they'll have blue, purple all around their lips, in empty baskets. August, our green corn moon. We have an annual celebration in August called Skamitzen, which translates to 3-day feast. And it's an awesome event. It used to be a lot bigger in the past, but it's getting bigger each year, and more communities from all over the country are coming. And this is open to anyone, native or non-native. And we celebrate. We get to have competition style dancing, songs, there's vendors, traditional food. And it's a really good opportunity to be immersed in our culture, and a really key component to our culture and Lifeways today. And this is something that has been ongoing. My Narragansett people, Ninigrit, put out into a newspaper in the early 1700s that we were having our August meeting, where we were gathering, and we still have this each and every year, the second weekend in August. And we invited the English, the settlers, to come and attend this event at a time when they were forbidden to. So our people have always been open to sharing our Lifeways and showing and being open and transparent with that, even when other English people weren't allowing them to come. September is our harvest moon. This time of year, we're really relying on getting and picking the majority of our crops, the remainder of our crops, and a lot of it's going to be dried and preserved to help get us through winter. So this time of year is a really busy time of year. A lot of work goes in, really a lot of work goes in throughout spring, summer, and now into fall here, where we're going to gather as much resources as possible. So we're picking our squash, our pumpkins, our corn, sunflower seeds, sunchokes. We're gonna really get a lot going here. This time of year also is pretty prime. We'll get false albacore that migrate to our waters at this time of year that we can go harvest as well. We're still down by the coast, but we're getting ready to move inland at this time, where we look for more prime hunting lands. October is our Sasaminiash, or our cranberry moon. And this is, our last berry of the season for the most part. And this is an important one. Like I mentioned with blueberries, how they thin your blood, cranberries actually help thicken your blood back up as the climate starts to change to a cooler climate. We have cranberry bogs in our region that we still go to and harvest. And we have different tribal community events around this berry as well. But this is a great one for our people. And again, just such healthy foods in our region. I always tell people, if you take the time to learn the things that you can harvest, we're really spoiled here in the region we live. My communities are both right next to the coast. We have woods, so we can go and we can hunt deer, turkey, squirrel, rabbit, and we can go to the coast and we can get a meal there. And then we have strawberries, blueberries. There's really an abundance of food here. This time of year is also ideal for harvesting mushrooms. So after a good rain, we'll go out and search for mushrooms, chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, corals, trumpets, puffballs. There's a really good variety of mushrooms available at this time of year as well. October, November, this is where the idea of a 13th moon comes into play, the falling leaves moon. Sometimes this moon falls in the summertime, where people call it a blackberry moon. These moons change and vary depending on region. Different communities have different versions of 13 moon calendars, depending on where they're from. But I like this one a lot because it shows that not only the people have to go through a transition to prep for winter, but the land is going through that transition as well. Here, we're fortunate we get to see the beauty of it with the foliage and the changing of the leaves, but the trees are dropping their leaves to preserve energy, to prepare for a long, cold winter. We've had weak winters the past couple winters, but traditionally that wasn't the case. So at this time, you can see the land making those adjustments, just as we are at this time of year. Everyone's trying to prepare for winter, because winter is hard for everybody and everything. November is the hunting moon. This time of year is ideal for hunting, especially white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer are, for the most part, big mature white-tailed deer are nocturnal. But at one time of year in November, they are looking for mates. They're looking to breed. And when they fatten themselves up before November. And then for most of November, they spend running around all over the place searching, which breaks their habit and makes them more susceptible to hunters. This is the only time of year they're susceptible to calling. So there's different calls like grunts or bleats that you can use for deer. You can rattle antlers to simulate a fight, and they'll come running in. And this picture here, you can see two deer are fighting. At any other time of the year, it would not be strange. And most likely these deer are running around together and eating together. But in November, it's a switch flips in their brain and they're enemies for the month. But that is an ideal time to hunt deer. Turkey at this time is ideal. Some people call this the beaver moon as well. It's because when beavers' pelts are starting to get thick, and this time of year you can set your beaver traps, which beavers are huge in American history. Beaver are really the first gold rush of America. A lot of people came here initially, specifically Dutch, to catch beaver to turn into hats and capes, different waterproof items. And if fashion sense didn't change, then we most likely wouldn't have beaver here today. So great time of year there. December is our Nakomo, or our gift-giving moon. And this one I like, and I've included because a lot of people only associate Native American people or Indigenous people with being in the past. They think of us living in villages and wearing buckskin. We do those things. We're in touch with our past. We maintain our culture and our traditional lifeways, but we also live a modern life as well. We have to pay taxes. We have to go to school. We have to go to work. Mashantucket and Mohegan, and Connecticut has a really poor view of Indigenous people because their big two tribes have casinos, and everyone associates Pequot people or Mohegan people with being rich. Indigenous people as a whole are the poorest 1% in America. And most reservations, most communities, there's 576 federally recognized tribes in North America alone. Most of these communities do not look like the unicorns that we have in the state of Connecticut. There's not paved roads, there's not big shiny casinos. My community is successful. It's had success with Foxwoods. From that, we were able to build a big museum, the largest Native American museum in the world. We've invested back into our community. We've helped pay for tribal members' education. And it's a lot different than other communities. And we're fortunate for that. But Connecticut and residents in this area often get a construed view of Indigenous people. January is the wolf moon. Now, we don't worry about wolves here in Connecticut anymore, but traditionally this time of year, the nights are long. So these wolves, their hunts are only successful around 20% of the time. So that means they're hungry 80% of the time. So in these long, dark nights, they would stay closer to communities. So the community members would be able to hear them more frequently in the winter, specifically more so in January, as they're hoping to scavenge and get a meal. February is the bear/snow moon. The bear are fully in hibernation at this time. And bears for our people are medicine animals. Our people would observe bears because a lot of people think of bears and they think they just go around and kill things and eat meat. They do hunt, but they spend a good majority of their life grazing around, eating berries. Specifically, so in the spring, when you hunt black bear, we would call them blueberry bears because they eat so much blueberries that when you harvest them at that time of year and you're skinning them out, their fat will be purple, and their meat will be sweet. So that's most people's favorite time to harvest bear. But they also go and they eat roots, and our people would observe this, and then they would go dig up those roots themselves and try it, and they would have medical benefits from them. Bear root is a great root that we harvest in this region, that we make teas from that really help with as a fever reducer. Snow moon, again, this year is a really poor representation of a snow moon, but we have stories of February and the snow moon in our Weetus here. You can see the two in this picture here. We would say that the snow would go so high that it would cover the doorway and we'd have to climb out through the top, through the smoke holes, and we'd walk around with our snowshoes. Winter is known traditionally, though, as the time of knowledge for our people. Everyone likes a good snow day, but a snow day for us today means we get a day off of school and class and whatnot. But back then, that meant you were going to class, essentially. You were having more time to learn. And how we learned is just what we're doing now, is by having conversations, by taking the time to sit down with one another and share stories. I always joke around and say, you know, our elders were our Google. Today we can go type in anything whenever we want and we can get the information we need. Traditionally, you spent time talking to the people who had the most experience, who lived off the land the longest, and they would help you learn those ways. And that's where we're gonna end, and I'm gonna open it up for some questions for you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nakai. That was really, really fabulous. Thank you for sharing all that. And I know we probably have a lot of great questions from our audience. Just as a reminder, if you do have a question, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, so you can go ahead and drop that in there. But I will actually kick us off with one, Nakai. I love how you talked about, you know, how different relationships look throughout each of these seasons and why they matter so much. And you've also spoken previously about how historic preservation itself is about these relationships. So can you say a little bit more about why that's so important and how it really touches on everything that you just
Yeah.
said.
So we rely on relationships with ourself, our mental health, how we're doing, relationships with others. That's something that can affect our mood drastically. And then we rely on relationships with creation, with our spirituality. And going even deeper into that, we rely on our relationship with the land and the resources that are offered from the land. And when it comes to historic preservation, building relationships is something really important to us, and we rely on it. We come from a relationship-based society traditionally. So today it's forming relationships with other organizations. For example, I serve on the Stonington Historical Society's board. And I'm the youngest person on the board, and I'm the only person of color on the board, and the first Pequot or Indigenous person to serve on the board. The reason why that's big is because our people, when we're in roles like such and we have the opportunity to do this, we're not looking to take control of everything. We're looking to have our voice heard and build relationships. We believe in allyship, and it's huge, especially in historic preservation, because, for example, my community doesn't have waterfront property. We don't have any access to the water. There's a river in Connecticut, which we're fighting for now to change the name back to the Pequot River, its traditional name. And it's called the Thames River, even though most people in Connecticut call it the Thames River, which is incorrect. But nevertheless, those relationships that we've built with the state are helping us in that fight to change it back to its traditional name, because we offer about 8,000 jobs to the state of Connecticut today. My community over the past 31 years has paid the state of Connecticut $5 billion from our slot revenue, which every single town or city sees a portion of that each and every year. But the lowest exchange in relationship that you can have is monetary, is money. What we're looking for is our allies, our friends, our people who support, things for the better good. That's really what our focus is on. But something that has helped me in relationships is the food sovereignty, is eating traditional foods. That's helped ground me and help me feel healthier as myself, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And that's an important relationship to take care of. So before you can really form meaningful relationships with others, you need to work on your relationship with yourself. And then a good way to work on that relationship with yourself is to focus on your relationship with the land that you live on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that actually leads perfectly into one of our next questions, which if you could just kind of, explain what food sovereignty is to some of our viewers who maybe are less familiar with it, what it means to you, and how our audience can actually get more involved with that.
Yeah. So food sovereignty it's the ideology of eating traditional foods, traditional foodways. And a key example of food sovereignty is like Alaskan communities having the ability to harvest whales still to this day, because it's something their people have traditionally been doing for time immemorial. So the ability for our communities, our people, to be able to eat traditional food sources and go out and harvest them. So for example, like I said, I hunt, I fish. I typically each and every year give away venison to the community, because not everyone in my community goes out and hunts. But for the most part, they like to eat venison, and the benefits that meat holds. For example, when I met my wife, she was very anemic, and she was having problems, and she started to eat venison, and it naturally started to go away. It's not a cure-all or anything, but she saw benefits from it. So eating traditional foods, eating foods from where you come from, foods that your families have been eating for a long, long time, have benefits to your body. And that's the ideologies of food sovereignty, traditional food sources.
Thank you. And you spoke about so many of those in each of your seasons that you covered. And one of our audience members actually has a question about that, wanting to know if tribe members do all harvesting themselves.
Yeah, so a good portion of tribal members will go out and harvest, and some people focus more on fishing, some people focus on hunting or mushrooms. It really varies family to family. Other than that, other people will rely on those people to get the goods from, or they'll just try to go to like their local fish marts and things like that, farmers markets. But there is a good portion that focuses on that. And I actually have my hat on now, a company that I started called Res Life Outdoors, which promotes and provides Indigenous perspectives on hunting, fishing, and cooking. And some of the initiatives, we're doing a meat giveaway on reservation at the end of this month, for the community to come learn a little bit more about Res Life Outdoors, but also be able to have a traditional food source.
So awesome. I would love to hear more about what that process was like to start. Sounds excellent. We actually have another question about the name change that you spoke about for the river, how long it will take to change the name to its original name, and is it pending with some part of the administration now, or what's that process looking like?
Yeah, so I think there's been 2 hearings so far. I haven't attended a hearing yet, but I've had to provide information, historical documents, calling it by its traditional name, which you see it in John Mason's narratives of the Pequot War. You see it in Lion Gardner's, John Winthrop's. So it's pretty heavily in there. We have had some, I guess, little holds up as far as Mohegans not wanting it named the Pequot River. But their alternative was to call it the Massapequatuck, I believe, which literally translates to the Great Pequot River. So it's something that we should be able to settle on, and hopefully that goes through. We've tackled a couple of issues in the past couple of years, and we're typically going with like 2 or 3 things each year that we're trying to accomplish. Prior to the Pequot River name change, was the fight for curriculum, and the inclusion in that process. After the Pequot River change, one that we're going to be bringing up soon is for the ability for our people to have coastal fishing rights, subsistence rights. There's communities, the precedence is really heavy in Indian country. All over North America, there's communities who have won their rights. The closest ones to us are the Mashpee Wampanoag people on Cape Cod. They have exclusivity. They don't need to buy a fishing license. They don't have limits on harvest or size. And they have their own programs where they have conservation for these animals too. So even though they don't have to abide by the state regulations, they are conscious harvesters.
That's great. And since you mentioned it, actually, the aspect of fighting for the curriculum that you kind of spoke to, as some of our audience members may know, the Connecticut State Department of Education last fall, I believe, Nakai, announced a partnership with tribal nations to create a Native American Studies model. And I believe that has been a work in progress. And Nakai, if you could tell us a little bit more about how that has been and what that will look like in terms of social studies curriculum, and why it matters, why it's so important.
Yeah. So first things first, working at the Pequot Museum, I see firsthand almost every day our children coming into the facility and kind of having to reconfigure their whole entire brain about Indigenous people, from the falsities that have been put in history books. And if it's not little kids, then I get college students and they're like, everything they learned as a kid was a lie. Why? And they have gained so much of a deeper understanding. So it was a fight for us to be able to have our voice heard to tell these stories. because often Indigenous stories are told by white archaeologists and anthropologists. And again, the only thing that we're looking for the opportunity to do is have our voice heard and have our perspectives. And we were awarded that opportunity now. We have developed curriculum teams where we're working. I'm part of the team. We have different members in the community that are developing this curriculum that'll go out to the state. We're also working on different programs. We have programs at the museum where people can fund different school groups and things to come into the museum. And we have goals to, we can be a fantastic resource for our region to help provide a lot of that curriculum, but also in building programming.
So wonderful. And it's going to kick off this coming summer, correct?
It should roll off in 2024.
Okay.
Yeah,
Something to look forward to.
absolutely.
And speaking of the great resources that you all have at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center, one of the things I was really admiring are your online exhibitions as well, so that people can really take advantage of the physical space and then continue learning more off-site. So the Reclaiming the Waterways, I think, is one of the exhibits that are currently available online. Can you talk a little bit more about how you all built that out, what the focus is, and how people can learn more about it?
Yeah, so something that we're presently doing now, there's a software that we use called Mashantucket. And a lot of people actually use software like this in their homes when they're selling them to get like the 3D virtual tour. And now every exhibit, every temporary exhibit that we have coming through the museum, we'll actually have it scanned and available on our website so that those exhibits will always live on, which is a really amazing thing. With the Reimagining Waterways, it's really huge, and the programming that we had going along with that in the past are canoe rides down the Mystic and different rivers where we're pointing out different historical sites. So there's deeper looks into that, but also some things that we have on the horizon for virtual experiences. We're going on our 25th anniversary this year, and we're going to be, you guys actually just got a really good sneak peek into it, but we're having a 13 Moons exhibit. And we're going to create an exhibit that tells the story of the 13 Moons, and it's going to have beautiful art. We're going to have artists from all different communities representing each moon, and the space alone is going to be an experience. The ideal of it is to look like Sky World. So when you walk in there, it's going to be very low light and dark. It's going to look like there's clouds on the ground, and it's kind of a guided view. I'm curating this exhibit, so I'm excited about it. And you're going to be guided to walk around this space. We have a great space in the Mashantucket Gallery where we hold our temporary exhibits, and it's a really spacious exhibit room. And we go through, and we're going to have holograms and television, like big TV walls, and we're going to tell the story of Sky Woman, like I told you today. And you're going to see how these moons are represented through art, which is a beautiful thing. So we have a lot of really cool exhibits coming up. The year after that, we're working on one of the biggest wampum exhibits that have ever been done, bringing 400-year-old belts here to Connecticut, belts that haven't been here before, and telling the story of wampum from an Indigenous perspective. And from today, wampum is something that is very much associated with Haudenosaunee people or Iroquoian people, but they don't have coastal access. So telling the story of the trade between our communities and how it has grown. But we're really working on doing a lot of things virtual now, having virtual programming available. For example, with that Mashantucket software that we use, we're able to do outreaches at schools and bring the museum with us, essentially. So one of our key or most prized exhibits at the museum is a half-acre of exhibit space, and it's the Pequot Village. And it is a life-size village represented in the 1550s that is just showing everyday life. And we're able to bring that with us along the way, pull it up on a screen, and take schools through it without them even stepping foot in the building. So trying to make everything more accessible for everyone is a big goal of ours.
That's so great. And I'm so excited to hear about that exhibit, especially after we've seen this presentation.
Yes.
When will that be opening?
So the grand opening is going to be at our gala on August 11th. The next day, it'll be open to the general public, August 12th.
Wonderful. Well, you will mark our calendars. That's really exciting. And congratulations on the curation. I know. So could you talk a little bit more about how, you spoke about the inclusion of art really in that upcoming exhibit. What is that going to look like? And how do you really do that outreach and make those connections with artists?
Yeah, so I have an extremely large family. And I get to talk about my community for a living, so I love to brag about them. And there's just a lot of talented community members within this local region who do a variety of artwork, from wampum work to basketry, pen and paper, watercolors, mixed media and video. And the museum, our goal is to be a resource for them, to use our name and our platform to provide vending opportunities. And from that, we've been able to really connect with a lot of the local artisans and ask them to come display their art and help us. We have awesome agreements. Our community, just strictly alone in the Pequot community, we have things to help benefit tribal businesses. For example, tribal members in our community, if they want to put anything in our gift shop, we have a 90 to 10 commission rate. So they get 90%, we get 10%. We don't see that anywhere else, and those opportunities are few and far between at other facilities. So giving opportunity, and that's the least we can do. We've had artists in residency programs, but this area, there's an abundance of great native artisans. And a lot of times you only hear about them if you're going like to the Abbey. The Abbey has an art market each and every year, an Indigenous art market in Bar Harbor, Maine. Or you hear a lot of the Santa Fe art markets out west. But we have our Winter Moon Market in December, which is going to be at Foxwoods. That'll highlight artisans from all over this region. But really, when I've curated an exhibit before for the museum for our 20th year anniversary, and now I'm doing the 25th. I don't like to limit people's artwork, or so there's going to be everything. For instance, last exhibit we had makeup artists, tribal makeup artists. We had poets, all different things. There's going to be the full array and spectrum of art on display. And we'll also have panels for the artists. But when you're in the exhibit, there's going to be very little writing about the art. The goal is for you guys to interpret the art and see the feelings that it brings up in you. But then there'll be opportunities for programming afterwards and videos afterwards that will be put out for the artists to explain their work.
Well, that is so exciting. Thank you for sharing more about that. And I think, something that when I have had the opportunity to visit you all, I think your programming is so special because it is always a conversation. And I think that's really important, and you all do a really fantastic job with that. So I look forward to seeing what that looks like with this new exhibit. Switching gears a little bit, I know you spoke a little bit about how the last couple of winters have been relatively mild, and you have done a lot of work as an advocate and activist, especially for climate justice. And so can you speak a little bit more about how your role has looked in that regard and how it relates to everything that you've shared with us today?
Yeah. So with the Natural Resource Committee for the community, things going on in Mashantucket that we've been working on. We've been combating the emerald ash borer, which has been terrible for our ash trees, which is a resource that we use for basketry traditionally. The alternatives they gave us was to spray, that kills our pollinators, or to cut down the ash trees and sink them. but killing a resource to save a resource is kind of a poor alternative. So that's something we're dealing with. We recently developed a forestry plan, which is really amazing, on reservation, and we're able to also single out. We have now a list of every single plant found on reservation, and we're sectioning them off into indigenous plants and then invasives. And we're taking the steps now to remove a lot of those invasive plants on reservation to let the reservation get back into more of its traditional ecosystem. Other things that we've been fighting for instance, my Narragansett community, just within the last year, had to fight in the town of Narragansett for the right to go to Narragansett Beach, to have free admission and to be able to go to Narragansett Beach. People were literally freaking out at the town hall saying, what are we going to do? There's going to be 4,000 Narragansetts storming the beach. We're not going to have parking. We're not going to be able to go do this. But yeah, being able to go to a beach named after our people it's funny, but that was a fight that we were victorious in. We were able to win that right, which is pretty awesome. Again, more fights, like I mentioned, we're going to be going for our coastal fishing rights in the near future. We are constantly talking to federal agencies on like wind turbines and deep sea wind, anything in the state where we're looking to preserve grave sites and culturally significant sites are things of real importance for our people. We've gone and we've been having conversations with different schools. It was about 10 years ago, within I think it was a 50-mile radius of the museum, there were over 200 schools with Indian mascots, which we helped the vast majority of them transition, or at least have that conversation, which it's important. And other than that, there's always some type of fight on the horizon. So we're constantly just waiting for what's next. But as of right now, that's really what we're focusing on.
It's quite the docket. Yeah. And I also, as we wrap up here, a couple of last questions. And if you do have any more questions for our audience, please feel free to share them. Nakai is happy to answer them. I would love for you to share a little bit more about the preservation of tribal histories and traditions for future generations that you've said, is so important to you, and what different ways kind of are for doing that, both within your role at the museum and outside of that.
Yeah. So that's really my reason is for the next generation. The work that we do in this lifetime is its intended purpose is to benefit the youth and benefit the younger generation, and lead a clearer roadmap of how to navigate and resources to survive. Technology is becoming a really huge asset in that way, where we're able to preserve oral histories by recording these stories, and we're able to digitize old documents where our young ones can go now and they can see written conversation of Pequot people. We can see Pequot people all over the world because of whaling with documents. So the importance of preservation is huge, and making it accessible, because our young ones today, they can go on a computer or a phone and they can run laps around us. And that's coming from me, and I'm a millennial. So just really taking the time. And one thing specifically with Indigenous people, but really everyone goes through this, at some point in our life, we go through an identity crisis. And it's really important for Indigenous people, because at a point in our young ones' lives, they have to juggle so much. They have to juggle school, they have to juggle sports or after school programs that they're doing. And if they have the option to go play in a basketball game or a football game or go hang out with their friends on the weekends, they're not always going to pick going to ceremony or going to drum or going to language class. So that constant balance of, a traditional life and learning your traditional ways, but also maintaining a modern life and having a social life with your friends and sports and things that everyone likes to do. So at some point in our lives, you'll see people wander off. And one thing that's really big in our community that we always say is we don't force culture. We don't force these lifeways. And for the vast majority of them, a lot of them come back and they're regretful, but they're appreciative and willing to learn, which is an awesome thing. So just being there, especially our elders, but in my community, I'm getting older and I have young people who are reaching out to me and who are asking me questions. So just being a resource. A lot of people can get caught up in their positions or their daily life, but just being kind is a huge thing, and just being available. If these young ones have questions, taking the time to have a conversation.
And it sounds like the door is always open for that. So
Absolutely.
that's really special and important. That's great. You spoke a little bit about, oral histories and digitizing documents. Are there any resources that you would point people to if, members of our audience were interested in learning more, where they can either read more about that, or if there's a collection somewhere that they can access?
Yeah, we're actually just finished developing a program at the museum called Our Stories, where you go through a program with a museum educator and they tell a handful of oral traditions and traditional stories from our region and other regions. But currently, we actually just got the document last week off of our share drive that we've been looking for forever, of a story of oral traditions and oral histories told by our elders from like 30 years ago. Yeah, so we're working on sorting that all out, and there will be a lot more programming available and having these stories accessible on our website as well.
That's so exciting. Congratulations. Making a find like that must be really exciting. Wonderful. Well, speaking of exciting things coming up, I will close us out here with one last question about, you already touched on a lot of the exciting upcoming projects you're working on, events happening at the museum. Are there any big initiatives that you'd like to highlight, or something that you're really looking forward to in the future that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so some upcoming events at the museum, and June 17th is our Strawberry Thanksgiving. May 26th, we're having a special edition Witness to a Genocide program, and it's on the day of the Pequot massacre. July, we have our educational powwow, which I always tell people is like a powwow with the captions on. It really breaks down and gives you a full-on point of view of what's going on and teaches you powwow etiquette for when you go to a real powwow. From there, in August, we have our 25th anniversary. We're going to have events every single month to highlight and celebrate, but we'll have different kickoff events. Our Skamitzen is the last weekend in August, our annual powwow. So there's a whole bunch going on. We have seasonal Saturdays throughout the summer where we'll be cooking outside at the museum traditional dishes. We'll be constructing a mashoon, a dugout canoe. There's supposed to be a Weetu going up. So there'll be a lot of stuff going on this year in honor of the 25th anniversary, and just to do some fun stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that we're all excited to make a visit of all of that. I know I am. So many exciting things coming up, and I was able to attend your Witness to a Genocide program last year, and I think it was really, really powerful, and again, a conversation. So
Yep.
Thank you for offering that space. I want to really thank you, Nakai. It has been such a pleasure having you here with us tonight. We're so grateful for your time and energy and just sharing so much with us. And we're excited to continue learning more. So I know that we cannot see our audience, but I'm sure they're offering you a virtual round of applause. And thank you also to our audience for being here with us tonight on our final Shining Light lecture of the season. We are so grateful for your time as well. And we will be sending out a follow-up email with a request for feedback via survey. We're always grateful for any feedback you can share with us as we continue to develop these programs. And once more, a huge thank you to you, Nakai. I hope that you have a great rest of your evening, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.